Hello everyone, this is Cardmates, and today we'll talk about why people fail at poker. There's a wide array of reasons why people fail to become winning poker players, and it's important to understand these reasons so we don't fall prey to them like so many other poker players have in the past. Why people fail to beat the micro stakes. We'll first off start discussing specific reasons why people fail to beat the micro stakes, and then we'll segue into discussing 10 common beginner mistakes in poker. Reason 1. They fail to recognize a need for improvement. There will always be people at the poker table who fail to recognize a need to improve their game or simply the lack of desire to do so. These people are typically players that don't understand basic poker tactics and strategies. They are what we categorize as fun, recreational players that play the game for enjoyment and to gamble. Most have never read a poker book, never taken a poker course, never had a poker coach, and never really applied themselves to try and understand the game and strategies behind beating it. Some may think they know what they're doing, but most are simply gambling on prayer. These types of players will always be a part of the poker ecosystem, and we welcome them. They're keeping the poker ecosystem alive and profitable for solid, winning poker players. Reason 2. Applying ineffective strategies and tactics for the stakes and/or type of player they're playing. The second reason why poker players fail to beat the micro stakes is that they employ tactics and strategies that aren't effective at micro stake cash games. These poker strategies and tactics often apply to higher stakes but just don't work as well at the micro stakes. While I'm not going to talk about which specific strategies don't work as well as the micro stakes, I want you to understand that the type of players that play at the higher stakes are drastically different than the kind of poker players that play at the micro stakes. Therefore, effective strategies that work well at the micro stakes are going to be drastically different than the strategies that work at the higher stakes. Reason 3. Not thinking deeply enough. The third reason why people fail to beat the micro stakes is that they don't think deeply enough about each hand situation. They often play what poker coaches call level 1 poker, where they primarily think about their hand and how it connects with the board, and play accordingly without considering their opponent's hands. They fail to consider their opponent's range of hands and how best to play against such ranges. This is important that you consider not only your hand but also your opponent's, and devising optimal strategies for playing against your opponent's range of hands. Reason 4. Poor bankroll management skills. The fourth reason why people fail to beat the micro stakes is poor bankroll management skills. Understanding how to properly manage your poker bankroll, when to take shots at higher stakes, as well as when to move down in stakes, is vital to your long-term poker success. Having too small of a bankroll for the stakes you're playing in is a recipe for disaster. It can take a very long time to build up a bankroll, but only one session to lose it all if you play above your bankroll means. A side effect of playing with too small of a bankroll is playing scared money poker. Scared money poker occurs when someone doesn't have enough money to play the stakes they're playing. This leads them to play over-timid and passive poker because they're afraid to lose. That's why the issue of bankroll management is really vital for every poker player. Reason 5. Getting too emotionally involved. The final and generally the most important reason why people fail to beat the micro stakes and poker at all levels is that they tend to get too emotionally involved. This is something that both beginning and experienced poker players struggle with. When we talk about being too emotionally involved, we're primarily talking about going on tilt. An altered mental state, specifically being angry or frustrated when playing poker, essentially anytime we aren't playing our A game. Beginning poker players often go on tilt because they don't understand variance and downswings in poker. Not knowing how significant a role variance plays in poker can make you very susceptible to tilt. When a beginning poker player goes on tilt, they often end up spewing off a lot of their chips and a majority of their bankroll. This is something we want to minimize in our poker game. Now we'll proceed to the most common mistakes. 10 common beginner mistakes. Now that we've talked about the reasons why people fail to beat the micro stakes, I want to go into a bit more detail and discuss 10 beginner mistakes I often see people make at the poker table. Mistake 1. Playing too many hands. One of the worst things that a beginning poker player can do is play too many hands. The problem with playing too many hands as an inexperienced poker player is that you inevitably get yourself into a lot of tricky situations where better poker players will look to take advantage of you, leading to costly mistakes. One of the primary reasons why we should avoid playing too many hands is we will often make underpairs or second best holdings to our opponent's better made hands, or simply be dominated by a stronger kicker in situations where we have the same pair. A simple example to illustrate this point is if we open raised King 9 suited from UTG and BTN cold called our raise with King Queen suited, where the flop is King Jack suited. We both flop top pair, but our top pair is dominated by a stronger kicker and we lose the hand. Another issue with beginning and struggling poker players playing too many hands at the micro stakes is rake, the amount of money a poker room charges per each hand. This is how poker rooms make their profits. Rake tends to be higher at the micro stakes compared to the higher stakes games. The higher cost of rake at the micro stakes can make marginally profitable hands at higher stakes games potentially unprofitable at the micro stakes, especially for struggling poker players. Plugging this leak in a beginning poker player's game is simple. Important concept: play fewer hands out of position and more in position. One of the hallmark traits of a good beginning poker player is knowing what hands to play and what hands not to play. Mistake 2. Lack of positional awareness. In general, you'll find that a lot of your opponents at the micro stakes will be positional unaware, meaning they don't understand the power of position, causing them to play just as many hands out of position as they do in position. Position in poker. You are in position against opponents who act before you. Conversely, you are out of position against your opponents who act after you. Positional awareness. Knowing what position you are in relative to your opponents and if you are at a positional advantage or disadvantage. Power of position. Utilizing information gained while playing hands in position to make better decisions than your opponents. Positional disadvantage. When you play a hand out of position, you are at a positional disadvantage to players in position to you. Playing in position to our opponents is a huge advantage because we get to see how they act before we do. With poker being a game of incomplete information, the more information we can obtain in a hand, the better our decisions will be. Conversely, when we play hands out of position, we're forced to make decisions with less information, putting us at a disadvantage to our opponents. Mistake 3. Playing too passively. The third major leak I see in beginning poker players' games is that they generally play too passively. Passive poker involves a lot of limping and calling, whereas aggressive poker involves betting and raising. While it's important to play passive in certain situations, it's not a good idea to play passive in all situations. There are a couple of common reasons why beginning poker players play passively. First, they lack experience and are unsure of themselves at the poker table, which leads them to play risk-adverse and passive style of play. Rather than be aggressive, they are overly cautious and try to play as cheaply as possible in a hand. This is commonly referred to as scared money. The second reason is that many beginning poker players just don't know better. They don't understand that playing too passively is a mistake in poker. The problem with playing passively all the time is that you won't have the initiative in the hand. Without having the initiative and being aggressive, the only way you can win is if you make the best hand. Additionally, a lot of good poker players you face will identify this leak and seek to exploit it by playing aggressively against you. A good poker player knows to play aggressively in the correct spots with made hands, drawing hands, and pure bluffs. Mistake 4. Overvaluing one pair. The fourth mistake I often see beginning poker players make is overvaluing one pair, especially top pair with a mediocre kicker card. This happens because most beginning poker players simply don't understand the value of having a good kicker card or the concept of relative hand strength. They don't look at the community cards on the board coupled with their opponent's actions and realize they are likely behind in the hand. Playing too many hands pre-flop also causes beginning poker players to get into this situation with weak hands such as Ace-4. Moreover, lots of beginning poker players just can't fold on an ace pre-flop such as the hand above. When they see an ace, they have an irresistible urge to play it, and when they do, they can find themselves flopping a pair of aces with a weak kicker card, only to lose a large pot to a stronger hand such as ace-king, ace-queen, or ace-jack. This is a very common leak, and solving it involves understanding what hands to play pre-flop and how strong your hand is post-flop relative to the board texture and your opponent's perceived range of hands. Mistake 5. Bluffing too often. The fifth mistake I often see beginning poker players make is bluffing way too often. I call this the World Series of Poker, WSOP, and televised high-stakes poker syndrome. What happens in televised poker is that a lot more boring and mundane hands are edited out from the TV show. So what we end up seeing on the television is a skewed view of poker, with most of the hands being exciting hands with lots of action and lots of bluffing. Beginning poker players see this on TV and they try and emulate this in their own game. They erroneously think that bluffing is a key aspect of winning poker. While bluffing is an important part of winning poker, it's just one of the many tools in a good poker player's arsenal. It's not the end-all be-all strategy to winning poker. The problem with beginning poker players bluffing too often is that they don't know the correct strategy for bluffing effectively. They don't know the right type of opponents to bluff. They don't know the right kind of board textures to bluff. They don't know how to properly size their bluffs. Lastly, they simply don't have a valid reason for bluffing. Good poker players, on the other hand, know when and where to bluff. The primary reason with bluffing at the micro stakes is that most of our opponents are either level 1 or fun recreational poker players, both of which neglect to pay attention to our range of hands. These type of players just play their hand. There's a saying in poker, you can't bluff bad players. Well, it's true for the most part at the micro stakes because most of our opponents are bad players. For these reasons, I recommend that beginning poker players bluff very infrequently while learning to play a tight and aggressive poker strategy. At the lower stakes in poker, most of our money comes from showing down the best hand and not from bluffing. This is the type of strategy I try to instill in beginning poker players. Then, as they continue to improve their poker game and move up in the stakes, they can begin to bluff more often. Mistake number 6. Thinking your opponents are bluffing a lot. The sixth mistake I often see beginning poker players make is assuming their opponents are bluffing more than they really are. In general, our opponents at the micro stakes are bluffing much less than we believe they are. For one reason or another, lots of students I've worked with believe their opponents are trying to bully them only to find they've been beat by a better hand. Assuming that our opponents are capable of bluffing a high frequency of the time at the micro stakes is generally a mistake, especially at NL2 up through NL10. Yes, some players are capable of running big bluffs, but the majority of players at the micro stakes aren't. Mistake number 7. Betting too small. Betting too small is a huge mistake that is very common at the micro stakes. The problem with betting too small is you're urging your opponents to call and suck out on you with a drawing hand. I often see losing, inexperienced poker players betting small amounts stemming from their lack of experience and confidence at the poker table. Rather than bet a substantial amount, they opt to bet a smaller amount with the mindset of risking less. Because they don't know basic poker mathematics, specifically pot odds, they erroneously offer their opponents the correct price to call with drawing hands. Then when they get sucked out on by their opponents, they blame bad luck and not bad play. Furthermore, when their hands hold up, they don't get the value they should. Mistake 8. Playing scared poker. When faced with a big decision with a strong hand, lots of beginning poker players will revert to a passive, risk-adverse nature and begin playing scared poker. Either they'll stop betting the best hand, or they'll make an incorrect play and fold the best hand. Remember, aggression and courage are two traits all successful winning poker players have. These characteristics may come naturally to you, or they may not. If you are naturally risk-adverse, you'll have to train yourself to become less risk-averse, or more aggressive and courageous at the poker table. One easy way to avoid playing scared is to have an adequate bankroll. The larger your bankroll, the less prone you'll be to feeling you're risking too much of your bankroll in any given hand. Mistake number 9. Being outmatched. The ninth mistake I often see with beginning poker players is that they are simply playing against better players and are often outmatched. This can be for several different reasons. Beginning poker players may think that they're better than they truly are, or they simply don't know better. Beginning poker players may sit down at a table where the stakes are too high for them, and then they are surrounded by a table full of poker sharks. The result is that the beginning poker player is eaten up at the table with all the sharks taking his money. This is a simple leak to fix. All that we have to do is start at the bottom. As a beginning poker player, we should strive to learn at the lowest stakes available to us, playing NL2 to NL10 at first. The reason for starting at the lower stakes is that it's the cheapest price to learn the game, and as a result, our mistakes will cost the least amount of money. At those stakes, we'll also be playing against weaker opponents, who are often better matched for our skill level as we learn the game. Mistake number 10. Being results orientated. Being results orientated is an issue for many beginning poker players. What do I mean by being results orientated? I mean that we, as poker players, are focusing on how much we win or lose instead of focusing on how well or poorly we're playing. For example, a new poker player will sit down at a table and judge how well he has done based on how much he's won or lost, not how well he's played a hand. A good and experienced poker player, on the other hand, can judge his or her session based on how well he or she has played each hand. Our goal in poker is to make the most correct decisions possible. However, even when we make correct decisions, we won't always win. A good poker player might play a session perfectly but still book a loss. Conversely, someone else can play horribly but still win. The easiest way to explain this is a pre-flop all-in situation, with pocket aces versus pocket threes. If we get our money all in pre-flop with the best hand, that's all that matters because we've made a profitable long-term decision. Sometimes our opponent will spike a 3 and win, but that doesn't matter because over the long run, we'll win more often than we'll lose in this situation, making it a long-term profitable decision for us. This all comes down to understanding the concept of variance, equity, and expected value in poker. Variance, the upswings and downswings in poker. More definitively, it's the difference between individual results in the short term and the average set of results we expect to see in the long term. Equity, your probability of winning a hand, i.e. how often your hand will win the pot if all the cards are dealt out and the players go to a showdown. Expected value, the amount you can expect to win or lose on average when you make a certain poker play. The main thing you need to take away from this video is that you shouldn't judge your play based on how much you won or lost in any given poker session, but instead on how well you played each hand. A key component of judging your play is hand history reviews, where you spend time off the table analysing key hands from your prior sessions. As in many sports, the final results often boil down to a very small subset of the plays actually made. Online players have access to sophisticated hand tracking programs making this easy, which will be introduced in the next video when we discuss HUD stats. Guys, if you like this video, give us a like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next video.